It looks to be quite clear and good connection.
Okay, this says issue with Facebook.
Just starting. The host. Come see. This is the thing. Come and see.
That's Salim.
Hi, Sankara. Are we
Let's see.
good to go?
Yeah, I see 10 people have joined, so we can kick it off.
Okay. Yes. There we go.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Legacy Archives and African Storytelling Community Session. My name is Sankara Yambo. I wear many hats. I'm an artist. I'm a flute player. I'm a beekeeper. I'm a farmer. But in this capacity, I am the community relations lead at PICHA Stock. For those who are not familiar with PICHA, it's a stock photography platform that helps global brands and agencies tell authentic, inclusive stories through high quality Afrocentric imagery. PICHA values ethical sourcing and creative integrity and upholds this by offering its contributors a 50-50 revenue model. With me is Salim Amin, the son of the renowned photojournalist Mohamed Amin. Some of you might know him, some of you might not know him. He is the guardian of one of the world's most extensive visual archives of African history with over 20,000 hours of footage and over 8 million photographs. He has vast experience behind the lens in both photography and videography. He is the chairman of CameraPix. He is the founder and the chairman of the Mohamed Amin Foundation, and he is also the founder of A24 Media. Salim, thank you for joining us. Do you want to say
Thank you,
something?
Sankara. Very, very good to be here. Very nice to virtually meet all the audience that has joined in. Thank you all for being here with us, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Okay, happy to have you. We'll jump right in. I'm going to start with an interesting question. I'm just going to ask what is a fun fact about you that people might not know?
Oh, interesting. Well, I collect comic books. I don't think many people know that. Comic books are my passion, and I've
Oh,
been collecting
really?
comic books since I was very young. So I have, yeah, I love Marvel, DC, all the different universes, and so yeah, I've been collecting those since I was 4 or 5 years old.
Okay, that's nice to know.
Yeah,
Who do you relate with more, the heroes or the villains?
no, I'd like to say the heroes. You always got to relate to the heroes. But in the world
Okay.
we live in now, villains are becoming more popular. Right.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
I have to
but
say, all the villains seem to be well read. They're always like
yeah, yeah.
doctor.
Well,
They
I
have
think the world is being run by villains at the moment, so that's the sad thing. You know.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's good
yeah,
to know. So, do you still read these comics or do you just collect
yes,
them?
yes, I do. I do. I don't buy. I used to buy them weekly once upon a time when I was younger, because that's when they
Hmm.
used to come out. But now they come out with the graphic novels, so you can read a whole sort of story in one book rather than buying it every week. So I tend to just get those, and they have them online now, but it's not the same as when you have a physical comic to look at. And I'm not a big fan of the more current stuff, the newer artists and stuff. I find it it's a bit too much, too graphic and too violent for my taste. The new stuff,
Yeah.
I think the classic, Superman, Spider-Man, Batman, those were great comics. But now the new animes and the manga and all this other stuff that people get is a bit beyond me.
Yeah,
Too old
well,
now. That.
I tried to catch up with the manga. I really followed Bleach, which I really enjoyed, but I think I got up to episode maybe 300 and something. I don't know if it's gone. I don't know if it's gone on after that.
And now they have the movies and everything as well. So it's all sort of all multimedia as our world has become.
Yeah, yeah, it's fun to know when I'm at your place next. It'd be nice to check
And
out
see
your
the
comic
collection.
comic
Yep, see the
collection.
collection.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to ask. So, what does a typical day, look like for you?
Well, I go to work at around so by 9 o'clock, by 8:39. If we're not shooting or we're not in the field, then I'm in the office by 9, and we have our archive meetings. We have production meetings, depending on what productions are going on at any time, and then just sort of general meetings with people, either coming to see me or I go. I rarely go. I try to avoid going out to avoid the traffic, but so try and get people to come to my place, and yeah, and then break for lunch for 45 minutes, and at 1 o'clock, and then I kind of leave the office at around 6:15, 6:30, and that's my feeding time for my two puppies. So I make sure that in by 6:30 I'm in the house and I'm feeding them and giving them their dinner and a little bit of a story and hanging out with them a bit, and that's the day. And then usually watch sport if there's football on or if there's cricket. At the moment there's the IPL, so a bit of that, and there's the tail end of the football season is coming up, so all the Champions League sort of semi-finals and the Premier League, the sort of last run in for the end of the season, and FA Cup. So there's plenty to watch at this point, and so just kind of do that, or try and grab a series over the weekends mainly. But if we're shooting, then just depends on where we are,
Definitely.
where we're going, so what time we have to leave, and then we're usually out for the whole day in the field.
Well, I have to say you have a nice. It sounds like you have a good work-life balance, which
Yeah,
is
well, I mean, there are times there've been a couple of projects where we don't, haven't come home at like midnight or 1 in the morning, and we're out again at 4 or 5, and it happens for months on end. But it is the nature of the job, so you don't complain.
Oh yeah, no, I was just saying compared to your dad's
Well, compared
work
to my
life
dad's life,
balance.
I have a very cushy life compared to his. Yeah, yeah,
That's
he was on the go constantly.
yeah. Well, thanks to him, you say you held your first camera at 8 years old, right?
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, like, you know, being with a camera that long, you definitely get familiar with it, but is there a time where like you really felt one with the camera? Like you're like, how people say they get into the zone while they're playing sports. And when was that? And
I mean, I used to shoot. The reason I started so young was I used to accompany him to go and photograph the safari rally, which was every Easter, and kind of took over the country every Easter, and so I loved cars and the rally itself. So so that was where I sort of went out with him at that age and started shooting. And I think that's the only time I think I've been really happy, with the cameras and knowing all that stuff. And then honing the skills, making a lot of mistakes, messing up a lot of times because those were film cameras. There was nothing digital, so you didn't know what you had until you went back to the dark room, processed, the film and looked at it, and then you many times realized you had absolute garbage, and you missed everything because you couldn't tell. And so it was a very different time, but it taught us, not just me, the other photographers, there are a lot of lessons.
yeah,
And it was, it was where my love for photography developed. And he didn't he loved, I think he liked having me around and accompanying him on this, but this was not what he wanted me to do. It's not something that he encouraged in any way. He was always like, get a real job, go and like a lot of Muini families, go and be a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant or something like that. The journalism, photography is not a profession.
oh really?
You can do it as a hobby, but he also knew that it was a tough life. He said, "This is not an easy life, as well, and so you need to be prepared." But it's all I ever wanted to do, and I wasn't particularly bright in school, so I wasn't very smart. So I knew I would never get to be a doctor, or although I couldn't imagine, studying for 10 years to try and get a degree like that. So
Yeah.
so for me, it was always a passion thing to want to do this, and then just continuing to develop those skills as I grew up, and then eventually going to university and doing a degree in journalism. But interestingly, the degree was mainly based on written journalism as opposed to photography or video journalism. But the course had bits and pieces of that. But I knew I could learn that side here better
Yeah.
than any university could have taught me. I learned that here much better. But if I could at least write decently, then that was a big advantage back then, because to caption your images, to put scripts to news pieces, that was something you always had to hire somebody else in for. But if I could do that, then that would be, you know keeping it in the family a bit more.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did.
Yeah, do you feel like you got like a lot of value from doing that in uni?
You know, well, value from university, I think, it was a lovely time of my life, and you partying a lot and enjoying and being away from home for the first time. Since I'm an only child, it was nice to be out, as well. And but I'm not sure I learned a hell of a lot. Yes, it was good experiences, good life experiences, being away from Kenya for a couple of years, a few years at least. But in terms of learning, I really learned the profession and the business, when I was here. And
Yeah.
university gives you a bit of a grounding, but the technology, when I was in doing my course, there was no desktop publishing. Computers were just coming to start doing. We used to do a newspaper, a weekly newspaper for the university. The journalism department was responsible for that newspaper, and so you'd have to do manual publishing. You'd have to lay everything out manually, and I don't think young people can relate to that in this day and age. But it was hard work.
I can
Um,
imagine.
and but then as soon as I got back, the technology changed, and everything started getting on computers, and you started getting desktop publishing, and you could design on the computer. So all those skills were, useless, to be honest.
Jeez.
But the skill of photography and videography, shooting on shooting on film cameras and video cameras, was something that I think honed the best photojournalists and video journalists, in the world. Those were the people that who shot on 16 millimeter film and who shot on 35 mil stills cameras. They are the best, I think, in the history of the profession. Those people are the best because they understood that you only had 36 shots on a roll of film.
Yeah, exactly.
So
So
you had to
everything,
think,
every shot, yeah,
you
was
have to you have
consequential.
to think about every shot. And it wasn't
Mm,
cheap either. Buying a roll of film was like, back in those days, in the 80s and 90s, it was like $5 or $6 for a US
mm,
dollars for a roll of film. That's a lot of money. And
that
then
is a
to
lot.
process that film was another $5 or $6. So you're looking at $10, $12 per roll, which in today's money is 1,500 shillings, but back then was probably closer to like 3 or 4 thousand shillings
Mm, mm,
for each roll of film. So you thought about it. Plus, you were restricted. You couldn't, with photography especially, videography, you had a bit more leeway if you were shooting video, because. But photography on the news front, there's one shot that is the money shot,
yeah,
and
the event's happening now.
if you miss that shot, that's it. You might as well just go home. You're not going to get paid for that assignment because you've
Mm,
missed it. Now you can miss it either by being in the wrong place or the wrong time, but most of the time was, you're clicking away happily, and your film finishes before the handshake, or the car comes screeching by, or the guy pulls out a gun or whatever. You've out of film. Now changing film was a process. You had to roll everything back, and you had to then take the roll out and then put a new roll in and feed the spool. It was a through 2 3 minute process, and by then you could have missed the entire event. So the people that had the skills in both photography as well as videography, they understood that we have a limited amount of physical material to work with. And so we really have to think about the sequence, about the story before you ever start clicking or shooting video. You really got to think. Um,
yeah,
so I think that's a skill that young photojournalists today are, they just click because you've got cards and you've
and
got unlimited storage almost. So you just click, and you hope that out of the 2,000 images you click, two or three will be usable. But someone's
yeah,
got to sit, you mostly, but in some cases other people have to sit and edit that content and put it, go through every image, and and sift through it, and it takes hours and hours of time. And if it's high res content, if you're shooting raw images, or you're shooting 4K video, it's high res, so it takes even longer to edit and work on the images, or work on the sequence for the filming. And then where do you store all this stuff?
yeah.
It takes up a lot of space. So you got to think about that. So it's a longer process now than it was before in terms of the post production. And so again, I
Yeah.
think you need to think very carefully before you shoot. And I'll ask the people that are that are watching the podcast or the streaming thing. How many of you actually go through your phones and look back at your gallery and go back 2, 3, 4 years and try and find pictures? I think very few. I would guess that very few people do that because they're so consumed with taking new images that they forget about what they shot a few years ago. And God forbid you haven't backed it up, your phone gets stolen while you're on a boda or in a matatu or in the walking down the road. Phone goes, you haven't backed it up on a cloud or on a hard drive. It's gone. Your entire life is gone.
We're definitely going to talk about, that's archiving in a different
It
light.
segues nicely into archiving.
But before we get into that, I'm just going to ask, because you're talking about how shooting on film means that you have to be more intentional, and so that means everyone was more sharp back then. Just wondering, like, so how like, let's say for yourself, how do you keep yourself sharp nowadays? Are you still
Well, I don't
shooting?
shoot. Number one, I don't shoot. I can't understand the
Okay.
new technologies. I can't understand the new cameras or the new video equipment or the new editing software. It's beyond my capabilities and understanding. I'm not that smart, so I don't shoot. I shoot on my phone like everybody else does now. I don't have a camera. I don't have a proper like stills camera. And so no, I don't. Now I do more producing and I do more presenting work and doing things like talk shows and stuff like that. That's what
Okay.
I prefer to be in front of the camera now than behind it.
Okay.
Um,
So
and
what? Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so that's kind of so but I we've trained a lot of young journalists, young videographers, photographers, sound engineers, editors at the foundation over 30 years now. And those are the only people that I will use
Nice.
in the
I like
field
I like that.
because I know what we've trained them to do, and even them when we were training them, we started them on film, on 16 mil film, so they could understand what that format was. Then move them onto videotapes, onto Betacams and Umatics, and it was and DV cams, and it was 3 or 4 months into their course before they ever touched a digital camera or went onto a digital system. So they understood the art of filmmaking before
And
they
how?
got, yeah, and how difficult it was. I mean, you can't when you're editing video, you're editing machine to machine, and so you're editing from one tape to another. So if you make a mistake, you can't just pick up like you can on Final Cut or something. Pick up
Yeah,
your shot and move it to the other side. You have to start all over again from the
yeah.
beginning and do that. So it makes you think about again what you're editing, what is the end product, and how can you do it as efficiently as possible. So when you do get to the digital systems and the easier editing systems, your mind is already thinking about efficiency as opposed to, and the tools are just make it easier for you to do your job.
Well, it's nice that you mentioned the foundation. I know the foundation hasn't been running for a while, but just wondering, like, in terms of, you know, establishing it, what was that like? And, what did you learn from it? And, how do you feel about, possibly teaching now?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the foundation was one of the most privileged things that I was able to put together in his memory in terms of it's what he had always wanted. He always talked about a training school because one of the things that frustrated him the most was when people would dismiss African operators, with that thing that they're not good enough. And he spent his whole life disproving that theory by
Exactly.
saying, that we are good enough. And he knew the kind of talent that was on this continent. It's just that people were not given an opportunity. He fought for his opportunities. He was lucky in many ways that he was able to do that. But one of the things he really wanted to do in his life, was to set up this training institute that would train technical journalists to the very highest level, not teaching you how to write stories and stuff like that, but the technical, the camera work, the sound, the lighting, all the stuff in the field, so that we could compete with the very best in the world. And that's what the foundation did for 26 odd years. We trained, hundreds of people from around the continent, not just Kenya or East Africa. People used to come even from Europe. We would get people coming to attend, to join the foundation, for join the courses. And it was a 1 year course, and it was amazing. And the trainers, I can take no credit for the training, because we got really good people that were there, and the trainers were amazing, and they did an incredible job. And the graduates that came out of here still continue to excel in what they do. And ironically, many of them, set up their own production companies in competition to us. And but that's a good thing.
It
That's the
is. It
way the
is.
world is, and it's a good thing. And like I said, I will only ever use, people from the foundation who've been through this training to actually do our jobs now, because I know the quality. And but then when COVID came, it was it was uh, it was difficult, because the training was so hands on, that you had to be here for a year. And so it was impossible to do it when COVID came. And then the trainers um, also got older, and they got to the stage where they, wanted to retire. So after COVID, we decided to give it a bit of a hiatus, a bit of a break, and look at other avenues for what the foundation could do. One of the things we're doing now is trying to train archivists, because there was one of the
Nice.
things that we found. COVID made us kind of look at the archive in a very different way. It gave us time to explore the archive, um, and we realized that there's not many institutions, if any institutions, around the continent that are training people on how to archive. And archiving is one of our great histories, and we've lost so much of our history because a lot of it is oral. So there's never been a lot of written stuff. And because of our colonial past, we've also lost a lot of the paperwork that we generated, where, the people in charge at that time decided to take it away, because it was incriminating for the things that they did and the atrocities they committed. But also they wanted to take it to a different country and own it, and be able to tell the history, their way.
That's
And that's something I think we've really missed out on. And I see institutions, sadly, like in Kenya, institutions like KBC and the National Archives, and the Kenya News Agency. They've got incredible content. I mean, it's mind blowing how much content there is there, and how amazing it is. But they don't have the capacity or the means to be able to preserve it, to digitize it all, and to catalog everything, to archive it, make it available, make it into a revenue generator for themselves, but also to preserve it. And this to me it's not just a Kenyan problem. This is across the continent, in many countries across the world that are having this
that's true.
challenge at the moment. And this, unfortunately, film, the negatives, film reels, tapes, they will deteriorate over time. They're not going to live forever, especially if they're not stored in the right conditions. They will deteriorate. And once you've lost that, if you haven't digitized it, you can't restore it.
That's true.
And even, I'm not sure, we understand archiving as well as we should. I mean, I'll give you an incident that we came across when we were doing something for Kenya's diplomacy, the anniversary of 60 years of Kenya's in the diplomatic arena. So we were asked to do the exhibition at Uhuru Gardens, and we did this exhibition. We put it together. We, you know, designed it all. And obviously, we have the images from the 60s, 50s, 60s, the build up to independence and then post independence. But we stopped shooting stills around the time that Kibaki came in. So around 2002, we didn't really shoot stills. We were doing more video, more motion images rather than stills. So we didn't have the Kibaki era, the Uhuru's presidency and Ruto's presidency. We didn't have any stills of that. So, we were doing this for foreign affairs, and they said, no problem, we'll put you in touch with the Presidential Press Service, and they'll give you the material that you need. And they did very good. They sent us three, 400 images to have a look at, and it was fascinating and really good stuff because they have access. They're close to these people. Nice images. And then when we wanted to print them, we got we had the selection down to 40, 50 images. We wanted to print them, and these were being printed at like by sort of 2 meters by 2 meters by 1.5 meters. Big
Big
images
sizes, yeah.
because that's what we had for Kenyatta and Mboya and Odinga and Jaramogi and Kibaki and Moy and these ones. We had all these fantastic black and whites printed up that big. And so we went back to them. What they had sent us was, 10, 12 MB images, just which we assumed was just to look at. And so we went back to them and said, can we have the raw images or the high res images so we can print? And they were like, well, I'm not sure. What are you talking about? I said, well, we can't print these, can't blow these ones up to that size. These you can get postcard, maybe A4 maximum and A4 size out of this, but that's it. And they don't have them. They've never saved
Jeez.
them. And even now, when they're shooting, I mean, forgetting State House, but every ministry, every CS, every PS has their own photographers with them all the time, shooting every day. Anything that they do, they're photographing, and so there's tens of thousands of images being generated on a daily basis about the work the government is doing, and yet they're not in high res because most of their audience is on social media. So they need to get them out fairly quickly, put them on X or Instagram or whatever place. If they're sending them to the newspapers, Nation, Standard, whatever, they can work with 10, 15 MB images. It's not a problem for them to print those. So they don't even shoot on raw format because it's too big a file to work with. And they don't have a central server system that they can store all this material where everybody uploads their contact captions, everything, puts the metadata on it, uploads it every day. They store them on their own hard drives. When they leave the job, they take their hard drive with them. And so we're losing tons of our history this way. At least with the physical stuff, it's still there. Kenya News Agency has places all over the country, different counties, where there's just stacks of images, negatives, prints. KBC has got them in vaults and in containers, shipping containers. They've got film reels, all of this stuff. So it's all there, and that material you can salvage. It may take a little bit longer. It may, need a bit more time, but you can salvage that material, and you'll have that. And it may be more
Then,
expensive. But once with digital, once you've got rid of the raw file, you can't upgrade a 10 or 12 MB image. You can
yeah,
downgrade a a raw file to a smaller resolution. You can't do it the other way around.
that's true.
That is the
Hopefully,
major
maybe
problem.
maybe AI will solve that problem. We'll see.
I doubt it. I don't think that they can regenerate an image. But anyway, that is a major problem, I think.
That's true. Considering that you're training archivists, how do you feel like maybe that issue can be solved in or can be dealt with in your perspective?
No, I mean training archivists is to train them with how to organize material, how to search, how to organize it, how to put metadata, how to scan, if you're scanning actual prints or negatives, how to digitize, and then how to store them in servers on a data asset management system so that they can be retrieved. That's the job of an archivist. Archive is not producing the image, right? The
No, I
archivist is not the
don't.
person in the field that is producing it. So that that
No, no, I'm talking more about like the archives or the footage that KBC has, and all
that
these
they need.
spaces.
Well, the thing is that you need to, in the case of, for example, 16 mil film reels, the majority of them need to be cleaned first before you can even view them. You need to clean them. That process, depending on how they were stored and what the state of those reels are, that process can take anywhere between 5 or 6 hours and 5 or 6 days for one reel, depending on the state of it.
Jeez.
So then you've got to clean every frame on that reel first before you put it through a projector. Otherwise,
Is,
it
is
will.
there is there machinery for this?
It's very manual. You actually use
Jeez.
chemicals and you run it through it. Then you wash it. Each strip you wash it with this chemical, and then it cleans off the dirt and the dust and the grime and things without damaging the film.
Jeez.
And then you have to play it and then see, because most of the stuff doesn't have any metadata with it. So on the reel, you don't know what's on it until you watch it. So then once you've done the cleaning, you look
Then
at
now
it.
you
It
have
could
to
be,
you have to find somewhere to play it as
it,
well.
yeah, you need a projector or something to play it on, or a steam back or one of those machines, and uh, and then you may find there's nothing on it. It was blank anyway. So then you've
Wow.
just wasted 5 6 days of your time and money and salaries, and there's nothing on it or nothing usable, or it's somebody's home movies that have no relevance, or it could be Jomo Kenyatta signing the Constitution, from an angle that nobody's ever seen before, and it could be mind-blowing content like that, or Bob Marley, performing in Kenya, and somewhere in Kenya, and maybe people never knew that he came here and did that, or in Ethiopia or whatever. It could be some incredible content, and it could be completely useless content, but you don't know, and you have to go through the whole process to do it. So it's a very costly exercise as well.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'm just gonna ask. Uh, I know you don't. You say you don't shoot no more in production. But I guess you could tell me like which stories do you feel still need telling nowadays? Which ones do you think like
I
uh
mean, I think there's a lot of stories that need to be, and then what I learned, Sankara, over all my years of doing this, is that everybody has a story. So, the problem is we never listen. We are also quite full of ourselves, and we've become more and more selfish in terms of, oh, it's only about us. So, but if you do take the time to listen to anybody, from a matatu conductor to a, bank clerk to a askari at a building, they all have a story, and they're all interesting stories. Everybody's life is interesting. Everybody has their own challenges. Everybody has their own successes, and everybody has ambition and dreams, and none of us, we're only where we are because we were born lucky. It's as simple as that,
I
and I
agree
think
with
once you realize that, you understand that everybody's got an interesting story to tell, and your duty as a storyteller is to listen to that story, and to get it out there. And the advantage that people have today, storytellers have today, is that they have the platforms. They don't have to be associated with a TV station or a media house, or they've got social media platforms that they can tell any story they want. So, I think the stories of one of our history are very important. I think finding people who have that knowledge, who lived through some of that history, and capturing that before they are no longer with us, is very important. It's vital, and we've missed many great people, and we've missed that opportunity. Who never wrote a book, perhaps, but these days again, people are not reading. Even if they did write a book, it's much more compelling when you have them on camera. And
I agree.
so I think the history is a major thing that we need to really start telling more of. And whether that
Yeah.
means, young people sitting with their grandparents and just putting an iPhone, their phone on, whatever phone you have, if you have a half decent camera, stick it in front of them and ask them to tell their story about their childhood, about how they grew up, about what they did and where they were at independence, all of that sort of stuff. And I think you'd find some fascinating stuff because they've probably never been asked that question.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a
so I
good
think
place to it's a good
it's a
place to
good place to
start, I
start, and
guess.
anybody can
Yeah.
do it. Start in your own home. You don't have to
I
go
like
out and tell
yeah.
stories.
I like what you said about because it reminds me of I don't know if you remember the conversation we had with Gloria who was talking about, and I hope she's watching. Hey Gloria, about doing a visual thesis, talking about making knowledge more accessible.
Yes.
But I just want to ask, as we I just wanted to say that as we segue into, you spoke about storytelling, and I wonder if you have any principles around storytelling. Did your father have any principles around storytelling, and do those hold today?
Look, I think it's good, very good questions. Sakar. I think principle wise, he was always a firm believer that you let the subject tell their story. You're not there to make put your opinions into it. You're not there. You as a journalist, a storyteller, are supposed to be an independent observer. Unless the story is about you as a person going back into your past to discover something and you're part of the story, then that's a different thing. But if you're telling it from somebody else's story, then just listen. Just, let them talk, let them follow them wherever they're going, do that, but don't interject your opinion that this is right, this is wrong, I don't agree with this. That's not your business. And I think, unfortunately, we've become, like I said earlier, become very opinionated, and we have a very high regard of ourselves that we think we know much more than the people whose story we're telling, and so we sometimes can't help ourselves, but to interject our opinion into that. And in some cases, if you are personally affected by something, then by all means, let that emotion come out. There's nothing wrong with that. But wherever you can, just be silent. Just listen to that person's story and empathize. Because again, it's not your job to make a judgment on what you're hearing or telling. That is the job of the audience. Your job is simply to record what is there. And that's what he did so well for 40 years of his life, was be an objective observer of
Yeah,
events that were happening. He didn't
creating
he didn't
creating
belong to
space.
he didn't belong to this side or that side. He wasn't part of any political party or looking at it from, and that is something that's so difficult to do in this day and age where everybody seems to have an opinion about something or have an angle on something, especially when you look at the US media and others like that and how they report things and one side or the
Definitely.
other. So that is so if we can be objective and get real stories out, I think the impact of those will speak for themselves.
Okay. Now that we're talking about six camera Mo, your father, a little bit. What are some memories of your dad that shaped your understanding of him?
I actually got to know him a hell of a lot better when I made Mo and Me, when I made the documentary on his life. That's when I got to know him a lot better. I don't think I appreciated him and what he did while he was still alive. Like many, I think that's the case with most people. They don't appreciate the people around them until they're no longer there. They don't take the time to get to know them, and so when I realized the extent of what he had done and achieved in such a short life, that's when it really hit me how important his contribution was to history, to recording all of these events, in many cases, like the Ethiopian famine of '84, to changing history, to utilizing this tool, this camera, as a device to do good with, and to open people's eyes about, to inform people. See, and he always used to say that, look, it's not our job to make it, to tell people what to do. Our job is to show what's in front of us, what's happening, so that people can make their own mind. You can't force people to help. You can't force people to give. You can't force people to change. All you can do is give them the information. So there should never be a time where people can turn around and say, I didn't know. Nobody told me. I had no idea this was happening. That's our job, I think, as storytellers, is to make sure people know what's going on. And then, you hope your conscience or whatever drives you, or your God or your religion or something, will make you do something good for the
Yeah.
situation that you're looking at. But after our job is ends after we've put that material out, that story has gone out, that's where our job ends. We can follow up the story. I think we should follow up stories for months, years to come, find out where those people went, what that situation was. When he did the Ethiopian famine in '84, he went back for almost a decade, to some of those areas, to see what was happening, to meet people that he had met, to check if they were, what the situation was, if they were still under, conditions of drought and famine, etc. He went back because he had an attachment to that story. And so, if it's possible, always check in on the people that you've told stories about.
Yeah. Well, talking about drive, like you say you learned about your dad by making Mo and Me. Did it help you understand where his drive came from? Because, I think, I don't know if it's in Mo and Me where someone described it, or was it you who said he had almost like a demonic
Yes, the
drive?
demonic urge to succeed. That was in her. Yeah. No, I think, growing up, being born in a very poor family, growing up in a poor household, not finishing his education, um, not being able to afford a camera, having to borrow stuff. I mean, there was, he was not a saint. So, he had, um, he didn't like being poor. So there was a economic reason, a
Yeah,
financial reason as well for him to do what he did. So, he wasn't doing this for charity. He was also doing it so that he didn't have to be poor. It's not like he spent money on things. He was badly dressed, and drove the same Peugeot 504, for 20 years, and never changed it. He didn't believe in those kinds of things. What he did spend money on was, on cameras, on new equipment, on
yeah,
things that would help his profession. And he was, fairly frugal man as well. So it wasn't about, he wanted to have that comfort and that security, that he would never go without a meal, and be able to
yeah,
look after his family and everything. And that, I think, stems from how he grew up and where he grew up. But he had the urge. I think he realized very early on in his life that he was holding something that was such a powerful tool to be able to change other people's lives. And I think that was the driving force behind it, was behind a lot of the things that he did, was to be the first person to tell that story and try and make a difference using this medium that he had grown to love.
yeah. Well,
And
I see a lot of people described him as he was like a bit of a difficult guy.
it was
Uh,
ruthless,
and,
ruthless guy.
like you juxtapose that to the fact that he had so many, networks, and that's how he got like his jobs and things like that. I'm just wondering, like, how do you reconcile that? Like, how was he
Well, I
able
think
to
he
manage?
was ruthless in the field. He was ruthless in
Mm-hmm.
the field in the sense that he wanted to be the first and only person with those pictures and with that story. That was,
Mm-hmm.
especially if it was a news story. But then he had this whole other side to him where he could, you know, go and live with a tribe of people for 3 or 4 months and photograph and document them and eat with them and sleep with them and drink with them and just integrate himself into that with the utmost patience and and humility and humbleness, and get their story that way. So depending on the situation, he was very adaptable. But when it came to news, he was completely ruthless, and that
Yeah.
was simply because he had a drive to be the best. He didn't want to be second best, and that's what irritated him. Going back to what we started this conversation with, that is what drove him to not accept that Africans can't tell their own stories. That we are not good enough to tell our own stories, that we need people from the West, we need Mzungus to come and tell our stories properly. That is what irritated that. He had to work with correspondents, foreign correspondents, a lot of the time. But every major story that he broke was his to break. I mean, in the sense that he was his contacts, his access to people like Idi Amin, to the famine in Ethiopia, to Zanzibar and the revolution, Boya's assassination, the fall of Mengistu, or Bukasa and his coronation. I mean, that was his contacts, his knowledge of the areas. That's what got him in. But in those days, and even now to an extent, certain extent, the camera people didn't get credit for any of these. It was you always the guy in front of the camera, the
Yeah.
correspondent that got, even though he or she might be sitting in the hotel room while you're doing all the craft outside, and then they come out and do a piece to camera on the roof, and they get all the credit for it. And that is till today still what happens sometimes. And but he wasn't going to accept that, and he made sure that he got full credit for everything.
Yeah. Uh, I definitely noticed, like, even the way I don't know which documentary it is that I was watching, but they talk about like his transition into now wanting to showcase Africa in a different light, which kind of also just talks about that compartmentalization. I guess
Yeah.
he was coming up from wanting to do things this way and wanting to do things another way. And to be honest, I didn't know that he was behind Africa Journal until we had that conversation, you and I,
He started Africa Journal.
which was
It
something
was
I
his
watched.
brainchild. It
Yeah,
was his brainchild. It was his thing because, again, as you said, Sagar, he was paid to tell the bad stories of Africa. That was all that the rest of the world was interested in at that time. Was the wars, the genocides, the famines, the starvation, HIV, corruption. That's all they wanted to hear about Africa, and that's what he was paid to go and cover. And he was very good at it. But it bothered the hell out of him that this is the only thing that people thought this continent was. And so first he started doing books. So he did over 100 coffee table and guidebooks on different countries on the continent, showcasing the beauty of the people, the cultures, the the flora, the fauna, the cities, the wildlife, all of that, the mountains.
yeah.
Um,
Which you have at the archive. I
which we
remember
have
you.
which we have in the
Yeah.
archive. So he did all of these books because he didn't have the internet. He didn't have any
Mm,
other way to portray the other side of the continent. And so he did the books. And then as technology advanced, he came up with this idea of having a weekly half-hour show that would look at the beauty of the continent, the artists, the entrepreneurs, the musicians, all these, the sports people, the people that made this continent. Is 99% of the people of this continent do magnificent things. It's only a
mm,
few that can be blamed for genocide and war and famine and things like that. But the majority of people on this continent have lives like anywhere else in the world, and they get on with their life, and they create things, and they create music, and they do art, and they're very interesting people. And so that's what Africa Journal was about. And it went for 30 years. It aired. It was the
yeah.
longest running show on the continent. And a lot of people, like you said, Zagar, grew up on
Yeah, I
Africa
can.
Journal, that very distinctive the
Tin,
beat,
tin,
the
tin.
drum beat as
Yeah,
you start.
yeah. I can.
Inchi
Yeah.
Inchi Etu was the song, was Inchi Etu.
Engineer to
Yeah, yeah,
a.
yeah.
And
And
I can hear that
that was
playing.
what people. that's what people relate to. That was his show, and
Yeah.
and he started it on. Unfortunately, he only went for he was only for 3 years before he died, and he started in 1993. And but yeah, it was, the likes of the people like Jeff Koinange and others. They were brought back to, start to, that was their first start at media here in Africa, was on Africa Journal. um, and uh, and so, and then there's still people, one of our senators here, Ladama Olekeri, some, I think he's the Maasai senator of
Mm-hmm.
Narok. Ladama's first job was on Africa Journal.
Oh, okay.
He
That's
worked for
nice.
Africa Journal there. So I've known him since he was like 17, 16, 17, 18 years old, and was that
Is it
Carol Radul, the amazing sports journalist, started on
started
Africa
out
Journal. Yeah,
nice, nice.
on Africa
Uh,
Journal.
y- is the footage on Africa Journal available in the archive as well?
Yes, we have all the episodes of Africa Journal
Oh,
in
nice.
the
That
archive.
would be,
Yeah, so we have all those
yeah.
episodes, and not necessarily the raw footage, but
Mm-hmm.
for everything, but all the finished shows.
Yeah, no, that'd be
Yeah,
nice to watch.
yeah. So
Yeah, definitely it's influential having watched Africa Journal. As we segue from your transition, your dad wanting to tell more uplifting stories in Kenya. And I know like there's definitely that dilemma between, you know, heart and stomach where people are trying to feed themselves and do that kind of work, but also trying to do passion projects that show the continent a certain way. Even with all that, like what do you think your dad you know, would advise, or what would he have to say to young creatives on the continent, especially in Kenya as well, navigating that?
I think the main advice that he always, and he gave this to me as well while he was still alive, is, never give up. If you have a passion, never give up. Things will be tough, things will get hard, you'll have ups and downs like in every profession, but as long as you love what you're doing, it will always be, it will never seem like a job. There's so many people that I come across, students when I lecture, but also when I do talks and stuff. There's so many people that unfortunately live their life working in a job they hate, from 9 to 5, just to get a paycheck because they need that paycheck. But they absolutely hate what they do. They can't wait for the weekend to go and, let off steam or drink or whatever. But that is not a life that you want to lead. You want to lead. We have one shot at where we are. And so, one must do what they love. And if
Hmm.
you have passion for something, you will always succeed. Just try and, make sure you're on top of the technology. Make sure you are a master of your devices, of your whatever you're using. You know those things inside out. You can take them apart. You can put them back together again. You know your tools, inside out, and then just let your creativity go wild. And he encouraged so many people that I only found out after he died, that so many people, young journalists, would come to him for advice and stuff. And this is what he told them. He said, just as long as you have the passion, as long as you are committed to something. He was a great example of that. It's not, he had no privileges, he had no special upbringing, he had no education. He was self-taught in everything that he did, and yet, became the best in the world. Not just the
Yeah.
best in Kenya or the best in Africa, but the best in the world at what he did.
Okay.
And
Yeah, to
yeah,
add on to that, okay, like what would you say? What would you say? Like a creative who has like the passion and is ready to put themselves out there. Like what would you tell them to do with regards to like personal branding?
I would say, your work has to speak for yourself. For
Mm,
itself. Your work has to speak for you. So produce the best that you can do and keep doing it until you get it right, until you're happy with it, you're satisfied with it. But that's only step one. Never be satisfied. That's the next thing. Never be
mm,
completely satisfied with what you have. Always strive to do something better. always make sure that the next project that you do is even better. What can you learn from the thing that you did before to make it better, to improve it? Would you shoot from different angles? Would you try different filters? Would you, use a different lens? Would you try and get a different, whatever it might be, and just keep honing your craft, making sure that every job you do is better. Because in this profession, especially with creative, you're only as good as the last job you do or the last
Mm.
product you produce. People don't remember that you were really good 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 2 years ago. They only remember what's the last thing that you did because that's the world we live in,
So, so
and
just keep creating
just have
constantly.
to be better. You have to keep being better and better every single time. You have to keep recreating yourself to be better
Mm.
every single time. And that's not easy to do. It's not. It's a graft, and it requires a lot of dedication and a lot of time. So it's not easy to do at all. But it's the only way that you stay relevant. I mean, the reason he churned out so much content, to have 8 million images over a period of 40 years, is because he couldn't make a living from just doing one genre of photography. If we're
Mm.
just doing news, he couldn't make a living that way. So he had to, he was forced to go and shoot everything. He loved shooting, but he was forced to go and do that. And it was time consuming because good photography or good filmmaking takes time. You don't just rock up someplace, hang around for 10 minutes, and you're done. You got to spend weeks and sometimes months immersed in this to get the best content. And he did that. That means he had no time for anything else. So it was the commitment as well. Family was second place. Everything else was second place to getting the job done. Even when he went to the game park on the weekend, if he was in, he would if he happened to be have a weekend at home, he would go into the national park and go and sit
Yeah.
there all day looking for that lion, that perfect lion, or the perfect buffalo, or the perfect rhino shot, and knowing that while he enjoyed doing it, he could also make a bit of money from that picture.
He was
And so it's
definitely
a
a hustler.
constant, yeah, constant hustling, not and I think you have to do that if you want, especially if you're a freelancer. If you're working for somebody and you're on a retainer and you're getting a salary or something, then maybe you can relax a bit more. But if you're freelancing, then you just have to hustle nonstop.
Yeah.
And it's
Well,
not easy in this day and age as well because everybody is a photographer. As long as you've got a half decent camera and a laptop, you're all of a sudden you're a production company. And so there's people that will undermine your work because there are many clients these days that don't care about the quality so much as they do about the price. So they will take people that are not very good and they will just make do because their content is going on social media and they don't really care. It's going to be up for a little while and then it's gone. So they don't want to spend $1,000. This is why we've lost so many clients because we will not work for less than a certain amount. We will not reduce our value. And so we will only work for certain people because we don't want to work for $100 a day. We can't afford it with our overheads. We can't afford to
mm,
work for $100 a day. But if you're on your own and you're living with your parents and you've got a laptop and a camera, you can work for $100 a day. It's good money.
yeah. Well, I see we've been going for a bit over an hour. So,
Time flies when you're having fun, right?
yeah, I'm going to invite our audience to share their questions in the chat. Hopefully, we'll get to that. But in the meantime, there are a few questions from our team, which I will go through. So the first one was, have you switched from shooting with film to digital? Why or why not?
Yes,
Well,
we
you
have.
said yeah, you said
Yeah, we did.
you
Yeah. I
did.
hate digital as a format, but you can't shoot. There's no film to shoot with now. Although it
Yeah.
is making a bit of a comeback in
Mm,
some places, the people are starting to shoot on film, but there's no labs anymore. There's no processing facilities. So unless you have your own darkroom and stuff, it's difficult to shoot on anything other than digital.
mm. Second question was, What kind of subjects are you looking for when you shoot? And I guess this is more like retrogressively, and why those subjects?
I mean, at the moment, my interest is piqued by history. So I'm very keen to to use the archive because I've been exploring the archive. So to see interesting things in the archive and then try and find the stories behind them, or try and find people that lived through those times and then
Okay,
go and
yeah.
tell their stories. So that's been interesting. Like I told you, Sagar, when you were here, when you came to see me, for the last couple of years of Uhuru's presidency, we were working on the new museum at Uhuru Gardens, which is one of the most magnificent structures in sub-Saharan Africa and one of the most magnificent museums. I think south of the Grand Museum of Egypt is one of the finest museums, but it's not been opened yet for whatever reason. But hopefully it will be. And working on that project was incredible because I learned so much about our history that I never knew. And I'm a history buff. I thought I knew a lot, but it turns out I knew very little about our history. But learning from that, and I know that every Kenyan will love that place because it's such an eye opener, such a revelation, and so beautifully put together and designed. That one hopes that it will be open very soon, and people can go and enjoy it.
Yeah, I've been looking to visit it. So far, I've only
Mhm.
seen it on YouTube because that's all
Yeah,
they have going. And it looks
yeah,
like it's
that's
finished.
and
I don't know why
that's
they,
our film. It's about 85%. What you see on YouTube is our film.
okay.
Because we're also making the making of.
Oh,
We
okay.
were
Okay.
also asked to do a documentary on the making of the museum. But it's 85. I mean, the construction is 85% complete, and the galleries are probably around 40% complete. So, but the museum doesn't have to open with 100% galleries completed. It's a living object. It's a living thing that
They
galleries are
should. They should.
changed,
They should.
open, closed, different galleries come in. It's a constant thing which entices people to come back over and over again. And it's
Yeah.
70 acres. It's a magnificent complex.
Yeah. It's definitely a valuable resource that I think Kenyans
100%.
need.
Every tourist, every Kenyan
We
will
need.
go and visit this.
We need access to.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna ask a question, and I think Guya had mentioned this earlier. This is in relation to a photography studio in Nairobi that was called Ramogi Studio.
Right.
I don't know if you know it.
I heard of it. Yes, I heard of it.
So a lot of people went and took
Portrait.
portraits and family photos from the 70s and 80s, and now it no longer exists.
Mm.
Um, and I think when it was closed, they had to get rid of a lot of those images. And I think the question is really about, you know, given that there's such little awareness around archiving, you know, especially in the context of maybe the family archive, like where does one begin?
It's an excellent question, and I wish we had the ability to be able to take everybody's archives and digitize them, but we've got to get our own house in order first, and we've got to organize ourselves because we've only digitized maybe 300,000 images from the 8.5 million. So we have a long way to go on our side, but the problem is it is a major problem, that especially as generations come now, they don't understand or realize the value of these images, and grandkids will find this stuff in their garage or in the attic or in a cupboard somewhere, and they're all trying to clean house, and maybe they're moving, maybe they're going to a smaller place, maybe it's a little bit more of a minimalist look, a modern look, so they don't need this garbage, what they consider garbage, hanging around, and they just throw them away because they have no emotional connection to the content. And that's not just Ramogi Studio is an excellent example, but it's happening across the country, across the continent, where a lot of these archives are being destroyed. And people who are lucky enough to find them and keep them and try and digitize them and make books out of them or do something with them, it's wonderful. And I hope more people realize how valuable it is to give others, even if they're studio portraits, it gives others a sense of the fashion of the time. What people were looking at, if there's old city shots, what Nairobi looked like. If there's all sorts of different things that you can learn from looking at family photos. And it's very interesting and fascinating to me anyway. And I wish more people would look at somehow trying to preserve them. But it's not easy. If you're not in the business of doing this, it's not easy to do that.
Yeah, well, recently my dad also handed over some of our old photographs or some of the old family photos to me, and I also have that same problem, trying
Yeah,
to figure out, okay, do we digitize these, and if we do, even is a digital archive even safe? Because you could lose those as well if it's like a flash drive or a hard disk. Like
yeah.
you said, your cell phone could go, your laptop could crash. So definitely a lot to think about there. I don't think there's any solutions in my part. It's still a work in progress, I would say.
No, I agree with you. There's no solution. And we're not the only ones facing this problem. People all over the world are struggling with this.
Yeah. A second question from Guya was, what is the significance of the archive to you as the son of Mohamed Amin?
Um, well, obviously, I know the archive. I know what it took to get those images because I know the story. So for me, it's a life's work. It's his life's work that's there, which makes me, I have an emotional attachment to it, which is why, as I said to you earlier, I can never curate an exhibition from that archive. We always will need an outside curator who can look at it a bit more independently than myself, because I know the history behind every photo, what it took to get that photo, what was the story behind it. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best photo, it's a valuable photo, it's an interesting photo to anybody else. So that, I have an emotional connection to it, and that's why I do this. Um, and but I don't. I don't know how long we can do this for. I mean, one of our challenges is what are we going to do with this archive? If I drop dead tomorrow, then my kids are not interested in this, and that this is not their profession. So, what is going to happen to this archive? So we need to find solutions to this as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm right here. We'll be coming to the archive to figure
Yeah,
out
I hope
that
we can
together.
do some exhibitions at least together.
Yeah, I want to go to the comments. I hadn't
Yes.
looked at these comments. I'm just seeing. This one's from Miss Ogola. She says, "I love how this conversation feels like we're in a time machine, going to the weights of photography from the past and coming
Mm.
back to the push of the present. Wondering what the pull of the future might be emerging, or the next generation of photographers, videographers, and if Salim might have some visions to share."
It's a good question, Mr. Willa. It's a good question. Photojournalism on the there's two separate things. One is the photojournalism side. So if you're a photojournalist, the odds nowadays of a photojournalist being the first person at the scene of a breaking news story are the same odds as winning the lottery. There will always be somebody with a mobile phone now that will capture breaking news, whether it's a bomb blast, whether it's a coup attempt, whether it's a flood, whether it's not a photojournalist doing. So that has completely changed what photojournalism is about. Now, a job of a photojournalist now is to explain, because you will get to the scene much later than after all the sensational images have gone out. So now your job is changed from reporting what has happened to why it has happened. So giving people context, giving people background, doing more reportage on the people that were after, following up on the people that might have been
Yeah.
injured or down. That's what
Building up the story, giving it
building
more
up the story
time.
is, and
Yeah.
that's a much more difficult thing than just getting to a place and taking a few shots. But with
So,
because of technology now, photojournalists are never going to be the first people on the scene. Same with
that's true.
videographers and stuff. They were on the news side, on the sort of travel, fashion, um, that sort of genre of photography, studio photography. Obviously, the technology is helping young photographers so much more, and it's some ways good, some ways not so good. And I feel that young photographers now learn more about Photoshop and Lightroom than they do about photography and about aperture speed and about speeds and about lighting and aperture. They learn more about how to do stuff in post production. So an average photographer can, if they're good at post and at these applications, can make themselves into a much better photographer than they are. They can take an average picture and make it better. Whereas in the past, you used to have to be a good photographer. You had to understand the how to take pictures. So nothing wrong with being very good at Photoshop and Lightroom and stuff. But I hope that the craft doesn't die away where and AI is only going to add to this problem, where you don't really even need a photographer anymore. You can generate something in an application, and not have to ever go to the place or connect to a place. And I hope that doesn't happen. But that's one of the fears I have with AI.
Yeah, definitely now, you have an iPhone. There's so much advancements technologically where, the AI is kicking in, you're taking a picture, it's doing all this work for you. So it
And it
really
doesn't even
bridges
have to be an iPhone anymore. It doesn't have to be an expensive phone. I mean, a lot of these Chinese, like
mid-level.
Huawei and these Oppo, all these ones. I mean, Samsung, I think, has better cameras than the iPhone to anyway. Um,
Yeah.
but all
I
these
think
other
Pixel, I
brands,
think Pixel as
all
well.
yeah, all these other brands have got Leica cameras, Leica lenses, on the back of them, and they're much cheaper cameras, and I think they'll do a great. They do a much better job. And as you said, the AI kicks in and enhances everything. But and this is the advantage, or not the advantage, but the one of the key reasons for saving negatives and original stuff is that this is something that people can always refer to and see that this was not AI, this was not fake. It was not generated by a machine. This was an actual photograph, of a rally car in front of a herd of elephants, and it was not AI generated. You can show them the original negative, and I think there's a lot to be learned from that.
Before I go to our last question, I'm just going to read some of the comments. We have Gloria who said it's so inspirational to hear and learn from you, Salim.
Thank you, Gloria.
Kashida says so many want to have ownership of our stories and take rights.
True.
This is why understanding copywriting is essential. Salim understands this. Obi says it's very disappointing that the historical material is treated so casually. There needs to be an official archivist to capture these images in real time. I love that and I agree.
Absolutely. Completely agree.
Christopher says archiving is indeed a major issue in Ghana. Recently found out there are 300 plus hours of unseen visuals of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah stored somewhere in Britain. We don't have the environment and infrastructure to archive these important visuals.
And
And
to that point, it's also the problem we have is that governments don't have that impetus. They don't care about archiving, and that's where it starts because it's impossible for individuals to do this, but it has to come and be a part of an actual part of government policy that they need to archive things properly. But unfortunately, we don't. African governments don't. The British, what is the downfall of the British now is the fact that they were such good archivists. That is what's coming back to bite them now because people are discovering all these things that they recorded and noted down and wrote about and did all these things, and they're not only being released now, and it's showing the atrocities and the crimes that they committed in many of these countries, but they archived everything. And to this day, we like to sweep our history under the carpet and pretend like it never happened, that there never was assassinations, or there never was an Idi Amin, or there never was Mobutu Sese Seko. There never were these, but they were. They were all. It's all part of our history, and we try and sweep it under the carpet. And this is going to be because young people don't learn about this history, because young people don't see this stuff. We are prone to repeating everything.
That's the same
And,
thing. Yeah.
and that's such a good point that we need to learn. 300 hours of Kwame Nkrumah's speeches would be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, Obi responds to Chris as well and says, if we considered the archive as important, we would have the infrastructure. There is just no focus on capturing
Yes,
history. Problem is that the politics ensures that some footage is best lost.
yes, absolutely right.
Yeah, they
It's in the
definitely
interest
don't
of the
want.
government.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's in the
they don't
interest
want
of the
us.
government of the day to whether what they want to showcase, and yeah, it is a problem across the continent and now globally. Look at what Trump is doing in the U.S. He's trying to erase African American civil rights movement, slavery.
I
He's just
know.
he's trying to get rid of closing the Smithsonian sides of the museums because he doesn't. They want this white privilege to live on.
I see Samora says, I'd love to catch some of those Africa Journal episodes. That was quite the show.
Thank you, Samora. Well, we'll try and digitize them and get some of them online.
Nah, yeah, I think that I definitely second that. Ramadan Karali says, always a pleasure hearing from Salim every time, an inspiration. I think
Hi,
you might
Ramadan.
know.
Good to hear. Yeah, good to hear. For good that you're online.
Yeah. And then he also adds, no lies, a freelancer is now is a certified hustler.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And he goes on to ask, my question to Salim is, how important is it for African photographers to prioritize archiving?
Vital. Absolutely vital. Great question, but it's absolutely vital. And again, it goes back to having that infrastructure to be able to do that. I mean, unfortunately, if you work as a freelancer, the majority of things that you shoot are for a client. So the client actually owns that content. So somehow trying to figure out an arrangement whereby you have certain rights to that material or can keep copies or can use it after a period of time, it's very important to do because a lot of freelancers, because they're so desperate for the job, give up the copyright very, very quickly. And that even has happened with filmmakers, people who've made series for Showmax or Mnet. They give up the rights for peanuts, and these guys, milk them for 20 years and make 10 times the amount or 20 or 100 times the amount that they've paid for these. But it's because the freelancers or the people making the content are so going from job to job. They're so desperate. There's no consistent work that they can rely on and focus on preserving their own content. And my dad knew this is something that he somehow knew the value of what he was shooting. He never gave up the copyright, even when he was doing stuff for the BBC or Viz News or Reuters or any of this. Never gave up the copyright of the original content,
Good on.
and that is what we sit on. And that's why we have some of this stuff. But it's much more difficult now because these organizations have become much more savvy, and they want to make sure that if you work for Reuters or AP or BBC or anything, you own absolutely nothing
Yeah.
on what you shoot, and they make you sign off on that. So it is tough, but wherever possible, try and hold on to some copyright.
Ramadan, that's for you.
Yep.
Try and hold on to some copyright wherever possible. Yeah, and I tell photographers this as well. It's definitely good to try and find time to shoot
Mm.
things, personal things on the side,
Yes. Yes.
whatever you can, as difficult as it is. We have one last question from Alan Aligula. And he says, are you talking on students interested in archiving, and what are the requirements? I think he's posing this question to you in
Yeah, for
terms
the
of
foundation. No,
yeah.
it's mainly. I mean, at the moment, because we're not massive and we don't have the resources. We're training archivists that are already, working in the archives. And how we train them is they come and work with us for 6 months or 8 months and learn the skills using our own archive. And so that's really how we do it. So we can only take a couple of people at a time. It's not like a whole course and everything. But we want to get to that. We want to get to that level where we can do proper training. And if we ever get a partner that will come in to help us digitize the entire archive, then that task, one, will take a huge amount of time, and two, will require a lot of manpower and woman power to be here in Kenya because we can't physically move the archive anywhere else. So, even if there's a firm from America that comes and says we will help you archive all of your content and do that, they're going to need to bring their technology here, and then we're going to have to hire people here that can do these kinds of this kind of a job. So that's kind of where we're aiming towards, having as many people reasonably trained to be able to take this on should that opportunity come along. And we're actively pursuing that opportunity. So it's not really students, it's more people that have been in this field but are not working at the moment or looking for opportunities.
I would say to Alan, and I'm sure you're okay with this, is that we could always send you like
Yeah,
a
connect
DM.
us. Yeah, yeah. Send us, give them my email address, whatever. I have no
You
problem. We'll
guys
also answer
have a
any difficult
discussion on it.
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you,
Um,
Alan.
Ramadan says, "Thank you for the answer. Much appreciated."
Most welcome.
Before we close off, I have one more question for you, Salim, which is, what do you see as the future of the Mohamed Amin archive? And yeah, once you answer that, I'll ask you one follow-up question to that.
Look, in an ideal world, I would love this archive to stay on the continent, to um, be utilized for educational purposes, to create curriculum using this archive to teach in primary schools, secondary schools, universities. But in order to do that, it has to be digitized and it has to be preserved. And sadly, I think that is beyond our capability as an organization. We're a small company, um, and again, ideally, government of Kenya, government of Ethiopia, government of Tanzania, Uganda, people who we have content of, historical content, should all be jumping up and down and banging down our door to say, we will. This is a
That's
national
right. Yeah.
heritage. We will help preserve this and support it and do that, but they're not doing it. And so I think it's sadly at some point I fear that this archive will have to go outside the continent in order to be preserved. It may have to go to the Middle East. They're building museums there. They are importing people's cultures. They understand history, even though it's not their history. They do understand the importance of it. I don't think Europe and the US is that interested in African history at this point, but that may change later. But at this point, sadly, I think that'll be the end result. It's not what I want, but for now, we just are going to digitize as much as we can, try and put it out. We've got 2 or 3 exhibitions planned for this year, both in Kenya and outside. And, if we can get people's interest that someone will come in and partner with us to do this, then that would be ideal. But if not, then at some point we'll have to bite the bullet and look at the preservation side. But any deal we do will hopefully incorporate the idea that this should be made available for educational purposes to schools across the continent.
Well, I was gonna ask how we can support that, but
Yes, just keep talking about it and keep pushing,
so,
using your own platforms to say that not just our archives, but all archives need to be preserved and looked after. That's the
Thank
best we can do at the moment, and hope that one day, government listens. All
yeah.
governments listen. Yeah.
Mr. Gola says, well answered, Salim. Brilliant conversation, learned much, and extremely inspired. Thank you both, and thank you,
So
Picha.
thank you guys for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. As we close off, I just want to thank you, Salim, for the time that you've
Thank you,
availed for
Sankara, for
this
having me.
conversation.
Thanks for
I
having me.
think, yeah, I think I'm definitely gonna find you so that I can, I really need to look at Africa, Kenya through your father's eyes. I need to look at that book one more time. Need
Come
to find
anytime. You're
those,
more than
need
welcome.
to, those Africa Journal episodes. I need to come check those out. And yeah, nice to come and just kick it with the dogs or kick it with you. Say
Yeah,
hello.
yeah. Sounds good to me, man. Looking forward to it. Thank you for having me.
Before we close off, I'm just going to tell our audience, Picha is always having events like this in person and virtual. You can find a link to our community events page. That's going to be dropped in the comments by Guya. You could also write for the blog. I think Guya will share a link to that as well. You know, we have a WhatsApp communities across US and Europe. We have South America. We have Africa. So feel free if you're a photographer and you'd like to shoot for PICHA to register with us and yeah, and join our communities. We'd love to have you. Uh, if everyone has gotten the links in the chat, we're gonna end this session there. Thank you, Salim. Have a great
Thank you
evening.
all
And
again. You guys have a great evening. Have a great Labor Day, long weekend
thank
as
you.
well, and stay
Thank you.
safe and stay out of the rain.
Catch you again
All
soon.
right. Take
Go,
care, guys.
go,
Thank you. Thank you.
go
Good night,
ahead.
everyone. Go
Good
ahead.
night.